Hi everyone. We're here with Dermot today. Dermot is in Bray, are you?
I'm in beautiful Bray today.
Beautiful Bray, and I'm in beautiful Dingle. So we are maximizing on our virtual capabilities here. And we're here today to talk to you a little bit about the European Youth Goals and the process by which they came about. And also just a few kind of tips for youth workers and experiences from Dermot about how you can engage with the youth goals and incorporate them into your projects, maybe that you're doing under Erasmus Plus, but also just your work with young people in general. So I suppose maybe, Dermot, maybe you can just kind of share your experience of the youth goals and how you've been involved with them and how you've engaged with them so far.
Yeah, so I guess I would say I'm very privileged because I got to observe and maybe on some level support the journey of, in particular, the Irish contribution to the development of the youth goals. So in my work with NYCI within the EU Youth Dialogue stream of work, we support, well, we gather with young people often to talk about how they can influence change or have an impact on decision making in both nationally and across the EU. But we supported 3 young people who went to the EU Youth Conference, within which the genesis of the youth goals was sparked, and they were, they would regard themselves as co-architects, I suppose. And for me, that's more than just the 3 people who represented Ireland at the conference, because they brought the voice of young people from Ireland with them, and the ideas and interests and challenges and issues. So it's been great for me to see how the youth goals came from a space where young people were literally the co-architects. And I know that wasn't in isolation, because there were also policymakers there and decision makers. So it's very much a nice collaborative piece of work. So yeah, I've got to see the goals evolve into something that is now quite a tangible piece of work that represents a massive challenge, I would say, to anyone who works with young people or anyone who wants to be involved in driving positive change with young people or on their behalf.
And what do you think in terms of I mean, we've come to the point now, we have these goals, and then, like you were saying, the challenge, so the what's next. And maybe you can talk a little bit about your experience of actually trying to use the goals in practice, I guess, and having them as a kind of a policy tool there, maybe for youth workers. So yeah, like what's been your experience of that so far, and how are the young people engaging with them as well, I guess, on a day-to-day basis, or the work that you guys do?
Yeah, and I think so they definitely, in many ways, the goals, when they came back, and they're quite, well, again, they're visually appealing. They kind of connect with you, and there's layers to them, which is also important. So they have top line, issue, and then within that, it's like the goals have these strong words like ensure and guarantee, and so they're action oriented, and they're, it's like throwing down the gauntlet. So for me, and for young people I work with, it's about saying that if these goals are the product of collaboration between young people and decision makers, and if they are identifying what the major issues are for young people, and if they are challenging us to pursue change in terms of them being goals, then it very much invites us to say, within the work that we're doing, and within Young Voices, it's supporting, enabling, and providing spaces where young people can articulate the change that they think is needed, or get involved in pursuing an issue towards a positive outcome. And they know. So the goals, I suppose, you can't achieve them overnight, which is healthy, I think, for young people, and for all of us to understand that change happens with a process. But then they really very much, also, I would say you can't ignore the legitimacy of them. So I think whatever 50,000 young people across Europe contributed to the process of developing them, or identifying them as the priorities. So I think within that, it's saying that if you are doing work with young people and you want there to be positive growth, development, change, and if there's an issue based to that, then the goals are an invitation to frame that work. And they also provide you with some I suppose, signposts about where the emphasis could be, and you can check yourself if you do want to achieve. So recently we've been working on quality learning, we've been working on quality employment for all, and rural youth. Moving rural youth forward. So, like, again, it's like saying moving rural youth forward is a legitimate issue because the young people of Europe have identified it. Within the goal, it challenges you to look at what needs to happen and what are the areas of focus that are required and the areas of action that will move rural youth forward. So, and in our work then directly with young people, it frames it for them, but it also leaves the space for them to put it in the context of their own lived reality. And knowing and appreciating that, again, for young people in Croatia, moving rural youth forward is an important topic. For young people in Ireland, it's an important topic. So there's an interesting dynamic there in all the EU countries, I suppose, about the solidarity part of the goals, to say young people are working on these goals within this framework in other parts of Europe as well as in Ireland, so they can zoom in and look at the how we achieve the goals in Wicklow, but knowing that if we zoom out, there are other young people in other EU countries in small communities who can also aim and pursue the same goal. And I think that's testament to the work that was done in developing the goals, that they are there for anyone to pull down into their local reality. They're also a tool for inviting decision makers into the space to say, here's what we see, these goals exist, they are validated, they're endorsed at all levels in Europe. So let's work together on them. So whether that's a local authority or whether that's a decision-making structure in your community, the Gardaí, or even within your youth project or an education institute, the goals can become relevant within all the spaces where young people exist, I suppose, and that makes them really, again, worthwhile. And I suppose then when they're a challenge, there's something to check your progress on. So if you want to achieve a goal, then it's saying, have you achieved it yet? No. Are you closer to achieving it? Yes. So we can congratulate ourselves for that, and then they fit into a journey. So it's not just, you can't just do the goals and tick a box. The goals are, I think, to be integrated into your work.
I guess they're evolving as well. But I think that's really interesting what you're saying, so that, like, in a way they can be used as a lobbying and as an advocacy tool with decision makers, but they can also be used kind of as benchmarks for your own work. So, if you're working on rural youth or whatever, that they kind of provide you with guidance in terms of like where we are maybe and where we want to get to. I suppose in terms of the kind of like advocacy bit or like working with decision makers and policymakers, what's been your experience so far of policymakers and decision makers at a national level in Ireland kind of engaging with the goals? Has it been positive, or do you think there's more that could be done? And, would you have any kind of advice maybe for organizations that are thinking about working with the goals more?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the lovely start point for the conversation about the goals is that we co-own them with decision makers. So they can't say, well, that's nothing to do with us, which again you can use to your advantage. But I suppose it also creates a common ground to start the work in terms of if we co-own them, then how do we bring them to life together? And I would say that the challenge in there, and I suppose the opportunity or what not to dismiss, is how the goals, and we took that on as a work for ourselves in Young Voices. How do the goals integrate into existing frameworks and existing structures? Because the goals are also represent values in many ways for young people and what's important. So in Ireland, if we have the Bob F framework for how we work with children and young people, for us, the challenge is where do the goals live within the Bob F framework? And in the same sense, when we do global youth work, we look at how the goals integrate with the Sustainable Development Goals and where's the crossover and where do they complement each other. But I think in terms of advocacy, and again, kind of even when you shrink it down into your local authority or the plans that exist in the public participation network in your local area or the SIPSI in your local area, they all develop plans that are used to roll out their work ETBs as well. So it's really about kind of identifying where the goals fit and sit within the plans in a way. And we would always say that they complement plans. Anyone else's plan that involves children and young people, the goals are complementary to that, and they're an asset. So I think then the challenge beyond that is, how do we action them within those spaces? And I think, again, in terms of, for us in Young Voices, how, like, what we would love to see is organizations taking them on in their own zoomed down realities and saying that I will pursue the local public participation network in my area, and we'll look for youth representation there, and we'll use the goals as a tool for building the connections between our work, and having something to look towards in terms of what we deliver. So because we can't do that in our national picture. I think the potential of the goals is that anyone can own them and take them and bring them to life.
Yeah, I think it's very much a case of, it's not one size fits all, and it's very much looking at your own reality, I suppose, and then how the goals can fit into that. But it's really interesting what you were saying then, kind of at a broader level. Obviously, there is that kind of solidarity piece as well, that that, like, okay, these goals came about from a consultation with 50,000 young people. So while the issues might look slightly different in various local contexts, broadly speaking at a European level, they still affect everyone, or they're still relevant to all those young people that were consulted. So I suppose as well, like from a national agency's perspective, from Léargas's perspective, it's a really good tool as well to look at, framing, for example, youth exchanges or youth worker mobilities, or, from my perspective, kind of the Key Action 3 projects that are looking at policy reform, and that really allow you to maybe work, like, even with one or two of the goals, and looking at how you can kind of change young people's reality and improve things for them. So I think, there's so many different options and opportunities to work with the goals. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, like, what are your plans, and, like, also maybe kind of some advice and tips for youth workers who might be looking at this and thinking, okay, I'd really like to get involved, kind of like practical tips for them.
Yeah, so for us, we have a thread of work that flows through what the EU, the presidency decides is the thematic area of work. So we now expect that every 18-month cycle of the presidency, that the goals will now fit within the thematic areas that will be discussed by young people within the flow of that. So there's an anticipation that at the highest level in the EU, that they will invite us to connect with a certain set of goals every cycle of the EU presidency, so that's one thread that will happen regardless. And that's great, because it means it ensures that the goals stay relevant, and that we are invited to connect with them and to, again, check our progress, and et cetera, et cetera. What I would say, again, in the national context or in the local sense, is that there's maybe a healthy piece of work in exploring where the goals map into your own strategic plan, or your own the work that you're doing. And I suppose it's good if someone might think, oh, that's more work. But for me, it's the goals aren't going away, and they really are influencing policy at a European level, and the amount of work that's gone into them. I like the idea of honoring them. But I think there is something interesting where young people and their youth leaders or youth workers, or within their youth project or their community project, to look at where do the goals map onto what we're doing, and then how do they complement and inform that. And I suppose then that kind of fits in with how you might reflect and review the work that you're doing, which again is not the funnest thing you do in youth work, doing your logic models and doing your evaluations and justifying your existence. But I think the goals give us an opportunity to feel good about the work that we're doing in that, again, in terms of solidarity, where if we make progress in the goals here at a local level even, it's great to imagine that at another local level somewhere else, they're making progress. And all that progress combined gives us a really kind of cohesive sense that Europe is progressing in terms of young people's situation. So I think if you can map them onto your strategic plan or your work plan, that would be great. And then in terms of Léargas, I think it gives you a framework for looking at the type of application you can make for a key action 3, or when young people are involved in planning a youth exchange or doing a piece of work that if you are referencing, if you're within your planning, the goals and where they sit within the thematic piece of work that you're going to do, they're an asset. They're an absolute asset, because again, you're not inventing the why or spoofing about some aspirational, kind of meta way of looking at change. It kind of, the goals can bring you into a space where it does help you frame the priority of your work, the focus, and even give you a sense of knowing that you're making progress when you're doing the activity, and that's throughout all the phases, I suppose. And I think then it's kind of looking at how I suppose when something new comes along like this, there's also that challenge. The goals will only come to life if young people help us with their innovation and creativity to bring them to life. So they've got lovely icons, there's been work done into their design. But I know that within Young Voices, for us, it's trying to give them life with young people, or young people take them from us and give them life in their own sense and in their own worlds. And I think that's again a parallel piece of work that will keep them alive, but also help them to flourish. So there really is a piece there about young people retaking ownership. I mean, the ones who were involved in the architecture, they know they were involved. But I suppose it's the story that filters down, and that a young person that I might meet tomorrow in a youth project, that they can also feel the goals are relevant to me and they're mine, and then maybe they'll say, well, I want them to be involved in the work that's happening in my local area.
And what you said there in terms of kind of Léargas, I suppose we love to see when people can connect the local to the European. And I think, even just for the purposes of a funding application, it's really good to look at the goals and see how they might fit in with what you're doing. I suppose lastly then, I know you were talking a little bit about activities that you were doing with the young people that you work with to help them connect to the goals. I know there was a reference to football, so maybe, if people are looking for some ideas, maybe you could just kind of give us a few tips.
So in my, I don't know whether it's an obsession with metaphors or trying to be creative and quirky in how I capture the attention of young people. So goals have a football kind of reference within there somewhere. 11 goals. There's a football team, 11 players. So we did one particular activity within a Young Voices day where we looked at the squad, the EU youth goals as a squad. And I can show you. I can try and share a screen maybe to show you an example of how we tried to, again, just to inspire the guys on the day to look at how the goals can be relevant. So we kind of laid out the team structure, but then we tried to frame the goals in terms of how they might metaphorically connect with the different elements in a football squad. So they had to choose so in teams, in a group, they had to look at the goals, get a sense of what each of the 11 were and what they meant, and then they had to kind of reframe them within this squad graphic. So the goalkeeper is choose one goal out of all 11 that will represent the last line of defense if all other goals were gone. So to try and just stimulate their mind to think, what would be, if there was only one, which one would it be? And that's more about them engaging in a discussion rather than really kind of focusing on, ultimately deciding that there can be only one. And again, with the 4 defenders, choose 4 strong goals that will be the foundation for all the other goals. So if we look at your defense as the kind of, again, the scaffolding for your midfield and your forwards, then what are the 4 strong goals? The midfield was, again, the goals that will be positive if the foundations are strong. So what goals can be built or maybe require strong foundations in order to flourish? And then the 2 forwards are the impact goals that would make a difference right now. So if they're on the field and you're activating them right now, what impact could they make? So again, that's us just trying to be creative in terms of getting the conversation going, I suppose, and stimulating young people to to connect with the goals. I'm sure there are youth workers all over Ireland who have a much better way of doing it than I have, but it's worth even kind of trying to find a creative way to connect the goals with some lived reality, but also to invite and support young people to have conversations about them.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Dermot. And I'm sure we can share that little presentation as well on our website or wherever we end up uploading this this video for people. So thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
No problem.
And yeah, hopefully this is the beginning of lots of projects and work around the youth goals. And I'm sure if anybody wants to connect in with Dermot or anyone else from NYCI, they'd welcome that. So thanks a million, and enjoy the rest of your day and get out in the sunshine.
If only.
Hopefully.
Thanks a million. Yeah.
Bye.
Take care. See you.